Hey everyone and welcome back. So doing a review today of a release I have been waiting so long, years. Actually, years. Literally been waiting years for a proper release of George Romero's Martin. And Martin is very special because it was actually George Romero's favorite of all the films that he made. But ironically, it was also one that hasn't really had that many video releases, especially sort of in modern times. There was the Anchor Bay DVD release, which was a nice release, especially for the day. Then there was a Lionsgate DVD release, which was kind of mixed. And then that was it. Never got a Blu-ray release. Well, technically we did. There was a Japanese release, which actually I do have, but that was basically using that Lionsgate master for that release. But finally, after all this time, Second Sight Films in the UK has given us a fantastic release of Martin on Blu-ray. Now the Blu-ray is region B locked, but also especially in 4K, and luckily 4K is region free, and this is the deluxe set. Now there is a standard release which you can get either just the 4K disc, or there's a separate one of just the Blu-ray disc. Obviously I have the deluxe edition, so that's the one I am covering for this review, but the discs themselves are the same. So if you're not interested in all the extra stuff, you just want like the movie and the extras, those releases you can get, and you get them luckily from a lot of different places, even if you're outside of the UK. And Martin has always been a very special film because, again, it's sort of like, it's very well known, especially among George Romero fans and even a lot of horror fans. But at the same time, it's a little bit also a bit underrated. I think sometimes it can easily get forgotten when people think of George Romero films because it's so easy to think of some of his more well-known films. Obviously, Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, Creepshow. And sometimes Martin can kind of get skipped over a little bit. But it's such an amazing film, and I'm so glad that we do have this set. So let me just jump right into it. So let's cover the box. As you can see right here, this is the outer box to the limited edition. There's a front with that great artwork, and there is the side right there with the title, and then very, very simple back, which you can see. I don't think there's anything on top or bottom, is there? No. So pull this out, and this is, whoa! Hopefully everything's okay. So it comes with a couple of extras before I get to the discs themselves. So first up, it does come with these little art cards, which normally I'm kind of like, yeah, it's kind of fun. These actually I really, really like. They're very well done. As you can see here, there's one of Martin right there. John Amplis' Martin. There's one of Cuda right there, Lincoln Mazel. Tom Savini. There's Arthur. There's Christine Forrest, who would eventually become Christine Romero, at least for a few decades anyway, right there. And then finally, there's George Romero, who does have a small role in his own film as the priest. Anyway, moving on to the next thing, we do have one of Second Sight's amazing, books. Like, I hate to call this thing a booklet because look at this. Look how thick that is. Like, that's a book. This is definitely a book. You can see there's a nice cover right there, and then just a back right there with a nice rosary, image of a rosary. And you see, it's like literally, it has all kinds of write-ups by so many different people, which is great. It's got some really just nice images, some from the film. I think there's a couple of these might be behind the scenes. There's some nice ones actually of George, which you can see there. And even some alternate covers. I don't know, this one's a crazy one. And then here's the old like Anchor Bay DVD cover right there. And a lot of great information here. I know I did see somebody say something I kind of agree, or I kind of wish, much like the Dawn of the Dead, their Dawn of the Dead set, the deluxe set specifically that came with the Dawn of the Dead novelization. It would have been nice if this set actually came with the Martin novelization. I think that would have been kind of a nice extra, but I also kind of wonder if maybe they tried and they just couldn't get the publishing rights, which is possible. Sometimes it's very easy for us to say like, oh, I wish this came with that. And sometimes these companies do try, but they can't always license them. So I don't know, maybe they tried and they couldn't get it, but yeah, it would have been nice if it did have the novelization, especially since it is so hard to find. And then finally we get to the part that actually houses all the discs, which you can see here. Oh, my OCD is going to drive me crazy. Let me get those. But here's the back. Very simple. You can see some of my fingerprints on there. I think I straightened out the discs, at least somewhat. So here's the soundtrack CD, which I am glad it comes with. Here's the Blu-ray. Now, the Blu-ray is region B locked, as I mentioned before. And then there's the 4K disc. And again, if you get the individual standard release, You get the Blu-ray, which just comes with the Blu-ray disc, and then the 4K, which just comes with the 4K disc. So let's dive into the technical aspects. So the thing about Martin is the fact that it's kind of funny because I literally, as of this recording, I just recently reviewed the Cauldron release of City of the Living Dead, aka The Gates of Hell. And these two releases actually have a lot in common as far as they've always been a bit problematic when it came to video releases because of the sort of source, the film that each one was shot on. So in the case of City of the Living Dead, for example, it was shot on I believe 35 millimeter. I mean, some people speculated maybe it was 16, blown up 35. I think it was 35. I'm almost positive it was 35. But it's a very grainy film stock, and it's one that's always been a bit problematic on home video, which is why the Cauldron 4K release is just spectacular. I'm still amazed that it looks as good as it does. And in the case of Martin, this actually was shot on 16 millimeters. It was shot on 60 millimeter reversal. Normally when you shoot on film, you shoot in a negative format, which then you have processed, but the negative holds a lot of information, whether it's 16, 35, or whatever. In the case of reversal film stock, it's a lot of what you're shooting is kind of sort of baked in, meaning you don't really have a lot of latitude to work with. So for example, if you're shooting, and let's say you overexpose a shot, if you're shooting in a negative format, you actually, even though it's overexposed, you can still pull information from it. So for example, let's say you were shooting like the sky, but because it's overexposed, it's basically just all white. Well, if you're shooting in a negative format, you can actually lower that in post. In the old days, it was in a lab, and current days, it's in a computer. And you can actually pull back the exposure, and there's the blue sky with clouds and all that. Now, in the sake of reversal film, you don't really have much latitude there. So pretty much if it's overexposed, it's most likely going to be overexposed. I think you can pull back a little bit of information, but not much. It's pretty much like it is as it is. And that's just the format that exists in. Now, in the case of Martin, of course, not only is the look sort of baked into the film itself, for theatrical release, it was blown up to 35 millimeter for theatrical distribution. Now, sadly, the original 16 millimeter elements, I believe, are either long gone or they're in such a bad condition that they cannot be scanned for release, sadly. So this release does come from a 35 millimeter dupe negative that was done from the original 16 millimeter elements. Now, on the plus side, it actually looks very, very good. Now, would it look as good as it could if it was coming directly from the original 16 millimeter elements? No, but it's good. And the thing is, you have to work with all you got. And in this case, all we have is this 35 millimeter blow up dupe negative. So I'm glad that they were able to at least have that to work with. And under the supervision of director of photography, Michael Gornick, they were, who was able to oversee it, and sign off on it. Honestly, it actually looks really, really good. I was really surprised and happy to see how it turned out because, again, this is a film that could potentially just not look great. In fact, in my opinion, the Lionsgate DVD is a prime example of this film not looking great on video. But Second Sight, just like they did with Dawn of the Dead and several of the other releases, like they put a lot, you can tell that Second Sight is definitely run by people who care about the films that they put out, and they put in as much effort as they can, and you can definitely see it. Because it does have a very solid representation. Now, I mean, are there things about it that are obviously inherent to the original source material? Yes. I mean, you can't escape that. A couple moments of very, very slight deterioration in a couple of the shadows and stuff. Very, very minor. And again, it's there. There's not really much you can do about it. Now, I will say, though, what Second Sight did was really create such an amazing presentation of the film. And it's one that I really wish that George Romero was able to see, in this. I wish he had lived long enough to see this release because I think he would have been so happy with it. And moving on to the audio. So this actually has 3 audio options. I was kind of surprised. So it does have the original theatrical mono mix, which sounded so good. There's kind of only so much. Martin doesn't have this like big bombastic soundtrack or anything. But it's very clean and it's very clear. It was a nice restoration that was done for it. Also has a stereo track as well as a 5.1 remix track. Now, the stereo track and the 5.1 track are still pretty much mono. Like, there's not really they're not really like stereo or surround mixes. In there, like there's some extension of the music, which is nice. And actually it is kind of nice because the music to this film, which I'll get to more in just a moment, is so great. You know, so it's nice to have that sort of extended, but by and large, it's still pretty much a mono mix. Nice option to have though, I will say that. But I am glad that the original mono mix is here. And I'm also glad that that's actually the default as well. As far as extras go, it's got some really, really nice extras. It's got a couple different commentary tracks, but one thing this release does have, which I am so happy about, because I was actually afraid this was going to probably disappear in time, but it's the commentary track from the old Anchor Bay DVD, which is with George Romero, John Amplas, and Tom Savini. That is actually one of my favorite commentary tracks, so much so I actually ripped it off the DVD, and I listen to it every so often. I love that commentary track, and I'm so happy that they were able to get it and include it on this release. And it's got an interview with Donald Rubinstein on the music, which is a really nice interview. It does carry over the sort of retrospective documentary that was on I believe it was on the Lionsgate DVD. And it also has a short film by Tony Bubba, which is nice. Tony Bubba actually was very much involved in the making of film, a lot of actually George Romero films, but a lot of the locations in the film are actually because of him. And he made a lot of sort of documentary short films around that time about the area, Braddock, where the film was shot. It has trailers and commercials and some radio spots, which is kind of cool. I've seen the trailer before, but I don't think I'd seen the commercials before. And then probably the big new extra is a documentary that runs, I think, just over an hour, and it's called Taste the Blood of Martin, and it's really, really good. Has new interviews with, I don't want to forget anybody, but some of the names, it was like John Amplas, Michael Gornick, Tony Bubba, Christine Forrest, a couple other people. I'm blanking on their names at the moment. That's like a nice new extra. And I believe that's everything for the discs themselves. So if you get either the 4K, the Blu-ray, you know, all that is on the same disc. And I do want to mention that one of the pluses with this release, unlike other releases, not just by Second Sight, but even by other companies, you know, a lot of times we will get the movie in 4K on its own disc, and maybe the commentaries are on that disc, but all the other extras are on like an included Blu-ray disc. And depending on depending on where these releases are, you know, those extras discs sometimes are region locked. But because all the extras are on the 4K disc, for example, as well as the Blu-ray, but if you get the 4K release and you're outside of the UK, or you don't have a region-free player, you can still watch all the extras. All right, anything else I want to ramble on about? I think I've basically covered everything. So as far as my score goes, with the picture information, again, kind of just like with City of Living Dead, you know, where it's like I have to take into account, you know, the film elements and how the film is going to look in sort of a general, when it comes to comparing it to other 4K releases. But then I'll take into account also where people like myself, we know what to expect. So for example, for your standard watcher, you know, probably picture would probably be a little bit more like a 3.5. But for fans of the film like myself, and we know like everything that has gone into the restoring of it and the limitations and all that, I mean, I was so impressed. So it definitely gets a 4.5 for me personally. So for the score, I'm going to split the difference and just give it an even 4. The audio, which sounds so good, I mean, you are a little bit limited, again, from the source materials, but it's so clean and it's so great. And again, you get 3 audio options. Same thing, I'm probably going to give it just a solid 4. You know, I think it's, and that's not taking anything away from all the work that Second Sight did here. The extras, especially for the sake of the limited edition anyway, yeah, I'd probably give it like a 4.5. I mean, there's a lot of stuff here that's really great. So as far as the limited edition goes, I would give it a 4.5, especially with the addition of the soundtrack and that great book with all the write-ups. And then my overall score, again, taking into account everything, you know, for people who maybe aren't familiar with the film, probably be a little bit more of a 4 as far as the recommendation goes. For fans of the film, like me, you know, who absolutely love this film so much. This release, I mean, I'm so happy, much like their Dawn of the Dead release. Like, I am still amazed that we got it. So it definitely gets a 4.5 overall. For me, now, if you have any questions also about, which actually does come up even in that making of that's included, about the longer cut of the film, why it's not here. Again, I think that has a lot to do with rights and things. I know Second Sight tried to get a hold of that longer cut. But the problem is I don't even know what condition that cut is in. I don't even know if we'll even ever get to see it because it was long. It was thought to be lost for like the longest time. I'm not holding that back. It would have been great if it was included, yes, but I can't. I know they tried to get it and they couldn't for a multitude of reasons. So as far as what is here in this set, it's a fantastic set. I'm so happy as a fan of the film, as in honor of George Romero and the fact that it was his favorite of his films. I think he would have been over the moon, so happy with this release. Let me hold this up. So those are my thoughts on the second sight release of Martin. Again, so happy that we finally have this. You know, it's kind of funny because like within the last week as I'm recording this, I've gotten two films that I was never sure I would ever see in 4K between The City of the Living Dead from Cauldron Films and now Martin from Second Sight. And in both cases, just so blown away by these releases. So as always, thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next one.